What's up, Dragon Brood? Today we're going to talk about 20 of the most interesting cards from Strixhaven. And let me say this before we get into it. What I find to be the most interesting may not be the same as what you find the most interesting. This is really just an opinion piece. This has nothing to do with like necessarily the best card or the top cards, though some of those may be included in this list. These are just things that after I ran over the set, we found interesting to possibly build around or whatever going into the first part of the set. And I have to admit, Strixhaven overall is actually looking pretty fun with a lot of different things we can do, a lot of new ways to build, some old color combinations being taken in different ways. So lots of really fun stuff going on here. So please don't take too much of this to heart. This is just entertaining where we get to talk about interesting things that I have seen in the set. Also, I want to say, welcome to the new Dragon Den. It's not really built out yet. I'm kind of going to get all the decorated pieces and all my magic stuff up behind me or whatever, but that'll come with time. But anyway, let's hop into this top 20 most interesting cards from Strixhaven. Okay, right off the top, we are going to hit you with one that's good for the Commander audience. We're going to talk about Cedrics Silverquill, which I also think it's very cool that all of the houses in Strixhaven got named after the Elder Dragons that, like, I guess were the creators of each of the houses, which is kind of cool. I don't know, I have to go read the lore on that, but that just seems really neat. But here we have a card that's actually good on its own merits. You know, it's a 2/5, it's flying, it's double strike, even if you never activate the abilities. But then it does give you 3 abilities to pick from that you choosing the correct one could break the game open for you. It also allows you to play a little bit of politics at the table. You can decide who gets a benefit along with you. Like, there's a lot of neat things going on here with this card. And I think it's neat because I could see situations where this could actually function on its own, being a 60 card, you know, top end finisher, or maybe something that goes with a token deck or some type of flying aggressive black white deck potentially. But it also goes into a lot of commander type decks. It's a flyer, it's a decent size hitter. It's got some cool abilities, and again, like I said, it has that political element, which a lot of commander players like. So I think they got the build on this one very on point. I mean, this is one of those cards that, you know, when people talk about, well, there's too many cards being made for commander, or too many cards being made for this. This is cool because it feels like it's serving a lot of different groups at one time, and that gets a thumbs up. All right, the second card on my list is Bloatout Guy. Coincidentally, also a black-white card. No particular reason, that's just the order they came up in. But really, I do like this card a lot. I mean, it's neat because you can make just X tokens if you just want to make some extra creatures. So it scales up pretty well. You know, you can spend 4 to make 2 2/1s, and that's just fine. But if you manage to pay 6 or more, well, then you just get to destroy everything that's not a creature. That seems pretty good. So then you get the pile of tokens and you remove the other things. I mean, I would say the only downside is that they do come in tapped, I believe. And that would be the only downside to this card, but I'm actually okay with that. I think it's still giving you a significant advantage. I also like this as potentially a sideboard card against some of the control decks and whatnot, where they have a bunch of spot removal. You can say, all right, cool. Well, I'm going to make 5 guys, 6 guys. Like, what do you do now? Right? I like what that's able to offer to a variety of decks. So I think this card could be fun both as a main deck and a sideboard card, just depending on where the metagame goes. All right, our third card on the list here is Culmination of Studies. Like, this is actually interesting because of the fact that you're likely to get some amount of mana back, because one of the things it does is generate tokens, or treasure, treasure tokens. So I guess I had it right the first time. But seriously, the fact that, okay, let's say you spend 5 or 6 for X, right? And a couple of them come back as actual blue cards, so you get the treasure, you get to deal some damage to your opponent. You know, like, it's just interesting that it's going to be doing all these things, right? And you get a lot for just one spell. Now, admittedly, it is kind of random. You can't really plan on any one of those things. Like, you might need damage to the opponent, and that's not going to happen. You might want to, you know, be hoping to have more mana for the next turn, and that may not happen. So that's the thing where I put it in the interesting category, not necessarily good. But There are some things that really, if you're playing any type of the is it decks that have been floating around, this card could contribute toward finishing, getting you toward the finish line, could actually contribute towards you just building up and having some big turn the next turn. And again, this card also scales, right? Like you could gamble when it's low, or you could wait and do it for 4, 5, 6 mana on the upper end and maybe get something better out of it. But this is actually really neat. I like this type of card because it's versatile in a non-direct way, but what you're going to get out of it is kind of a gamble. All right, next up, our fourth card on the list, I believe, so I'm keeping count. I think that's right. I'll have to fix it in editing if I'm not. But Silverquill Silencer. This is a cool one because it's 2 mana, it's a 3/2, so that alone makes it at least playable on an aggressive level if you're playing anything in the, I was going to say Orzhov colors, but for now we'll say Silverquill colors. And it actually has an ability that can, it doesn't stop your opponent from playing anything, but it just kind of guarantees you're going to get a 3 mana shot at it, or 3 damage shot out of it, right? So it's going to guarantee 3 damage, kind of, if there's a key card you're worried about. Usually you're going to call something like probably Shatter the Sky, or maybe if you know they have a certain Planeswalker, or maybe even some case of something against like the Ultimatum decks, you know that's what their top end is, and a lot of times you can already get them low on life, so them getting to that could be a problem. Also remember that this functions in multiples as well. So if you have 2 of them, that could be 6 damage, 3 of them could be 9 damage. Lots of different things going on. And it could also be a case where maybe you know the best card destroys something else you have in play. So you can just call that. So if you do lose it, you still end up getting the 3 damage, and they're still going to have to take 3 more if they don't kill the Silverquill between them. So there's a couple different things going on there. I also like the fact that it is both a human and a cleric, because it fits into 2 different archetypes that already have solid builds in various formats. So if you want another human that does something cool, this fits in that. If you wanted another cleric that could maybe give you something else to drain your opponent for a couple of points of life, this is another one as well. So fitting into a couple different builds, quality aggressive creature, low mana cost. It's doing a lot of things here, so I expect it to see some amount of play. All right, here we have Blade Historian. This is the 5th one on our list. And Blade Historian's only a 2/3, so not real big, but for 4 mana, you kind of go like, oh, why? But it gives everything double strike. And the reason this card's interesting is that Wizards tends to be very conservative on how they cost double strike and what creatures can get double strike. Even through the whole history of the ability existing, only a few creatures, that maybe we could fit on one hand have double strike at a cost that's efficient enough that you really want to play it, or easy access to it on that card. But having something like this that can give everybody double strike, kind of a big deal. One of the places I've considered this card is actually in Winota list. Because think about this, like you attack, you go turn 1 creature, turn 2 creature, turn 3 creature, boom, you get your Winota, you're attacking with your 3 things. One of the humans you get is Blade Historian, then everything has double strike that attack step. That is glorious and awesome, and it maybe even protects the creatures you have coming into play from dying to the blockers that would be blocking them, so that could even help. This card is actually going to potentially do a lot of work, but it does only fit some very specific decks. I don't know if I'm throwing this into every red or every white deck. Now, I could see maybe post-rotation, wherever the mono red decks maybe no longer have access to something like Torrent, or maybe the white decks don't have access to Heliod, something like that, and they're looking for another top-end answer to help them close the clock. Well, then maybe this card get looked at. But until then, I think it's only got a couple of niche uses, but I'm actually okay with that. I think the card is very neat still. All right, number 6 on my list is Elemental Expressionist. And this one's neat because it also falls in that 4 mana split mana combo for each of the houses or schools or whatever we call them. And it's a 4/4, so this one's a real body. It is 4/4 for 4 mana, and it has a cool ability that if you have the ability to play spells, because it's Magecraft, then you can basically give something the ability that if it leaves play this turn, you get a 4/4. I love this because it's actually really neat to protect your cards against sweepers, spot removal, anything like that. Imagine being in a situation where your opponent goes to Heartless Act a creature and you're like, great, lightning bolt you, shock you, whatever, cool. Now whatever you just targeted turns into a 4/4. Granted, it's probably this, so this gets turned into a 4/4 and the creature gets exiled. But that's actually kind of neat though, right? Being able to get one more benefit out of a card on the way out. Now, I would assume most of the time you're going to just be turning your Expressionist into another 4/4. So that's probably the part that makes it not so awesome. But there are going to be some cases where maybe your opponent goes to Extinction Events or Shadow the Sky or Doomscar, whatever. And you're able to play 2 or 3 cards in response because maybe your opponent's not playing, I don't know, let's say your opponent's playing control, so you have some dead cards in hand. Well, now you can just fire off the dead cards that are minimal use, and now you turn those into 4/4s potentially, right? So there's going to be some uses for this card. Now, granted, I don't think it's going to be popular, and if there is a spot for it, it's going to be only in a handful of decks at best. But one thing we have seen with the different Is It Spells type decks is they have kind of suffered from not having any creatures that are hefty on their own to do any fighting. And since you're only playing red and blue lands, this could be a card for that deck. And since you already have so many instants and sorceries, this could be a good way to kind of keep the damage going against your opponent. All right, number 7 on our list is going to be the Flame Scroll Celebrant, which I guess is the front side also of Revel in Silence. Revel in Silence, just gives you a turn to keep your opponent from playing a problem card or whatever. I am totally good with that, and there's a lot of situations where that ability in and of itself is very useful. However, I do like the Flame Scroll Celebrant, is it? The 2/1 for 2, because it does have a decent activated ability to be able to pump itself up, which is always good, to give it a +2/+0. But whenever your opponent activates something, they end up taking a point of damage. This is the type of card I enjoy because, we start looking ahead to rotation and whatnot. And people say, okay, well, what would the red decks play? What are the aggro decks going to play? What do Winota decks end up playing? Like any of that stuff. And then you start looking at cards like this and saying it's low cost, it's efficient, it has a fairly affordable activated ability. It has an ability that does matter, maybe even in older formats potentially. I mean, if your opponent goes to, play something that's got a lot of food-based stuff, maybe they're doing the cat oven thing. I mean, assuming they don't actually already have everybody. Sure, it's great, but it could be a fun sideboard card. But post-rotation, this could actually be a mainstay in some lists. So this is one to keep an eye on. If nothing else, the backside of this card actually has some uses on its own as well. So this would be a fun card because each half could actually be a playable card in their own colors. But if maybe there is a quality, lore hold color, I guess I want to say Boros because that's what we're normally used to saying. But, if the red-white combos do have some decent decks, then maybe this card just makes the cut anyway. All right, coming in at number 8, I have Torrent Sculptor and Flamethrower Sonata. This was one, if you saw my previous Strixhaven video, like the day 1 reviews, I think, or whatever it was, like I did actually come in pretty high on this card, but mostly because of the Sonata. I think because this card lets you filter your hand, draw a card, then discard, so you get to draw first, which I like. Then whatever you discard can actually deal damage to something, which is also great. And then kind of later, you have the other side that could actually do some work for you. And I don't hate that at all. I think it's actually just a decent card with a good upside. But with the backside being so consistent and useful, I think that's totally okay. Like, this is the type of card that, again, I think, well, I say that. I think here, you probably want a deck that can use both sides together. However, I could see situations where just the red side is playable on its own. I think we're going to see very few situations where the blue side is playable on its own. But if you're able to splash blue or get access to it, then having the option for both sides is going to be great. All right, coming in at number 9, we have Prismari Command. And this one, actually, I need to look at this because I have to remember these choices in order here. So it's a 3-mana instant, colorless red-blue that can deal 2 damage to any target. Target player draws 2 cards and discards 2 cards. Target player creates a treasure token. Destroy target artifact. Now, I would assume in most cases you're going to either draw 2, discard 2, and deal damage to something. But I could see occasionally where you want to ramp up and make a treasure token. That could be very cool. There's some decks that already want more treasure tokens or artifacts. That could be a benefit. And then occasionally you get to destroy an artifact. But I think the first 2 are what you're going to choose more often. But again, earlier where I was talking about those Is It Spells decks that keep coming up just a bit short, and we've said for a couple of sets now that they're sort of just waiting on a particular tool or item or whatever to show up. This could be the type of spell they want, right? It's a removal card. It lets you draw extra cards to kind of reload your hand. so you can have more spells to play or find whatever the big thing is to get you over the top and to the finish line, right? So this could be the type of spell those decks have been looking for. Potential. I never thought it would be necessarily a command, but hey, it's 2021. Here we are. Coming in at number 10, we have Double Major. And this card I like because usually when we see things that copy stuff, it's either copy things already in play, various permanents, tokens, counters, whatever. We also see copy spells. Not often do we get to see where you just get to copy a creature. Not a creature in play, a creature spell. That alone has it making my most interesting cards list. And I actually think the card could be kind of fun. I mean, now, I don't know how many you would play in a deck. Maybe you're just playing 2 or 3 just because. But imagine being able to play like Gargaroth and copy it. That sounds like outstanding. But even something as simple as being able to copy a Lovestruck Beast might be good enough. It's another 5/5, so that's nothing to turn your nose up at. So I don't know, there's a lot of neat things I think you could do with this type of card. There's also cards that have enter the battlefield abilities that if you copy those could be interesting. So there's just a lot of things happening with this card, and it's actually very cheap on casting cost, being 1 green, 1 blue. So that also makes it very playable, at least gives it a real shot of being a card. Now, is it going to be something? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to build at least one deck with it. All right, number 11 on our list are Shale and Ambrosia, I believe it is. I got to look up these names. I keep forgetting. Okay, and Ambrosia it is. And I like these two because they are actually I would say among the legendary cards that kind of got double-faced, I do like these the most because they're both fairly costed for what they are creature-wise. I believe Shale is 2 for a 1/1 Vigilance flying, and Ambrosia is a 4/4 for 4. But they both have good abilities. One puts counters on things, the other puts counters and potentially kills things. If you have things with counters die, you get to draw cards. These are working really well together, so early game you want one, late game you want the other. They're both legendary, obviously, so you can't have duplicates of the same side, but that's okay, right? Both of these abilities work well within the decks you could be playing them with. And again, maybe you're playing a +1/+1 Flyers deck. Maybe you are playing some type of Abzan or Golgari, but I guess here it's Witherbloom. I don't know. How are we supposed to refer to these? Who? I don't know. I'm still old school and probably Golgari when I should be Witherbloom. I don't know. Y'all tell me down in the comments how y'all are going to be talking about these different color combinations. But either way, something with +1/+1 counters allows you to do a lot of things there. And Ambrosia could be used to actually pick off your opponent's small creatures. If they have some 1/1s or 2/2s, or maybe they blocked with something, you can go ahead and finish it off with 2 damage and get to draw a card for it. So lots of neat things going on with these two cards. Should be a lot of fun whenever they show up in play. Number 12 is Venerable War Singer, and this card is all kinds of interesting, right? It's a 3/3 for 3. It's one colorless, a red and a white for 3/3. It does have Vigilance and Trample, so it's going to get to do some damage most of the time. And if it deals damage to the opponent, however much damage it deals, you get to get a creature that cost or less out of your graveyard. That's a mouthful, but it actually is a really useful ability. And again, it fits into several different strategies already, especially if you're playing a low to the ground, go wide strategy. You're going to be able to get most creatures back out of the graveyard. It's a reasonable body, just being a 3/3 all on its own. You do have the ability to attack and block because it has Vigilance. Again, if we're playing something maybe with a Minota style deck, this is a quality thing to play on 3. And maybe if it deals damage, you get a bonus card back for your efforts. It's so many things going on here with this card. 3/3 for 3, you kind of go, that's an average size, but it does have some really good abilities on here. And a lot of words that are going to be a lot of fun if you can make it work. All right, number 13, Humiliate. Not too much to say about this card other than that it's a quality discard spell. And you get it even more of an upside of putting a +1/+1 on one of your creatures. It's like insult to injury. I cost you your best card, and you're going to get hit for more damage here. It is a sorcery, but that's fine. That's kind of the case for most discard spells. Yeah, like I said, not too much to say that this is just a good all-around quality card. And I can see most creature decks that are playing these colors, if you want a discard spell, you're probably going to go this route. All right, Tend to the Pest. This card is a lot of fun. I think... we have a situation where a lot of people like using village rights because I get to sack your thing, or you target my creature and I'm going to get 2 cards. But what if like I could sack a creature and get 4/1/1s? That sounds like way more fun. And when the 1/1s die, I'm gonna gain life for my troubles, right? This is a fun card. Now, is it any good? I don't know. Maybe you play like 2 of in a list. If your opponent goes to kill a thing, you turn it into blockers. I mean, into more creatures. If your opponent blocks with some attackers, or I mean, you're attacking, your opponent blocks, and something's gonna die. Maybe you turn that into some blockers so you don't get hit on the retaliatory strike. I mean, there's just so many things that this can do for such 2 mana. It's actually neat, and it's an instant. So I like a lot of what's going on with this card. Now, again, is it stellar? Yeah, I wouldn't call it stellar, but I could see a lot of uses for it. And depending on which way the meta goes, maybe this becomes a reasonable sideboard card. All right, at number 15, we have Rip Apart. It is a sorcery for 1 white, 1 red, but it gives you the option of dealing a 3 to a creature or planeswalker, or destroying an artifact or an enchantment. Right? This is actually kind of good, right? You get your choice of basically having a disenchant or just blasting something for 3. Now, I wish we could have hit the opponent with it, but the fact that we can't doesn't stop this from being a playable card. Most things you're going to want to target are probably going to be 3 or less toughness anyway. And just having the bonus to destroy an artifact or an enchantment for 2 mana is also very nice. So I love the versatility here. All right, at number 16, we have Baleful Mastery. And honestly, I just have to ask the question, like, does this become potentially one of the best removal cards we've ever had in Magic? Like, is this a top 5? I don't think that's hard to say here, right? For 2 mana, you can kill whatever creature you want. Yes, if you only pay 2, you're going to have to give your opponent a card, but late game, you don't care. And it exiles. It doesn't even kill things, right? So this card is really good. And, credit to Wizards. I'm not sure I would have come up with a design where for 2 mana we could exile a creature or a planeswalker. But here it's like, okay, is that worth it to give your opponent a card? I think that's a fair exchange and still something you would want to do most of the time. Now, I don't know if you love playing this early against your opponent to get rid of some things, but maybe you do it in a slower control deck or something and you don't mind as much. But either way, I think it's actually pretty interesting as far as an R&D touch that goes on the card and gives us something a little different, a little powerful. But yeah, it still feels balanced, but at the same time could be an all-time great in its category. All right, at number 17, we have my preview card, which at some point in editing, I'll try to remember to link it if you want to see the video I did on that. It was fun because we cracked open some conspiracy theories there. But xtis is cool because every time you play a spell, you get something out of the graveyard, which that in and of itself is a cool ability. And double strikes as a 2/4 creature. So again, it's a little undercosted as far as the size, but the ability is a big bit of upside. And if you really have to, you could block a 4/4 and kill it. So nothing wrong with that. The backside letting you get the avatar, especially since you can reduce the cost, is neat. And from a commander standpoint, this is one of the few times you can actually just put a spell in the command zone, or at least play one from the command zone, because you have a front side that's legendary. So that actually is a fun and interesting thing here too. Though I will say, you almost have, if you're playing Commander, you have to be in Mardu colors, which we still didn't make a school for that, so it's still Mardu, dang it. But it does let you play, I will say that from a design standpoint, I believe it's the only thing in this set that actually has a different color card on the backside of a double face card. So for Commander, you do have to be playing all 3 colors, but for Standard, do you want one side or the other? Is X just good enough on its own? I think it could be in the right build. Is the avatar good enough on its own? I think that's a little bit different. Maybe, but less likely. Though, could still fit into potentially some type of Grixis builds. Maybe even the Rakdos Sacrifice list might want a 1 or a 2 of this type of card. So it'll be interesting to see where these land, if anywhere. All right, at number 18, we have Strixhaven Stadium. This is a very affordable 3 mana to be able to kill your opponent when you get 10 cheering fans in the stands, or maybe every counter represents like 1,000 fans or 10,000. I don't know. It depends on how big we're going to say that stadium is for a university stadium. I don't know. I'm getting too deep in some weird lore building stuff there. But I do like this card in the sense that it could be a good answer for some decks against control strategies, right? Where maybe you can't get through more than 1 or 2 hits at a time from some like 2/2 creature they leave on the field. Well, if this is here also putting a counter on its own every turn, you could really create a serious clock your opponent's going to struggle with. And it's every time a creature damages your opponent. Now, they could damage you and take counters off of this, so you can't really build up to 10. But I don't think that's going to happen all that often from those builds. One of the things I will say is this probably isn't something you want against other creature decks, because then you're just putting counters on and off, and you're probably not going to get to a winning scenario all that often. But I do think against these slower control decks, this could be a very interesting answer. Downside, they are generally playing things like Binding of the Old Gods, which would be able to kill this, but it's still worth it to force your opponent to have to find a card to answer it. Okay, number 19 on the list is Mastersymmetrist. And this card's actually pretty cool in the sense that it's already a 4/4 for 4, so it's playable on its own, and it does actually have reach, which helps it out, especially in an environment that's going to be full of rogues and whatnot still. And maybe even some things from like Clarion Spirit and random other flyers. But it gives the trample ability to each creature you have that has an equal power and toughness. So something like your Lovestruck Beast and things like that get a pretty significant bonus. But when you're looking at a card, say like Bonecrusher Giant, it now becomes bad. I'd be interested to see how this affects a lot of different cards and if the decks actually change to include more creatures that fit the criteria to get the trample bonus. This could also be big in a world where maybe people go to playing more 1/1s, maybe even making more pests, depending on how these cards from Strixhaven work out. So I think there's a lot of uses for this type of card. Now, is it going to be something you would want to play 4 of? Maybe, maybe not. But if you do, I think that really shapes the rest of the deck that it's going to be in. I think it's kind of cool. I'd be interested to see where it lands. Hopefully it gets a little bit of play, because I think it'd be really fun to see some action. And then the last card I'm going to cover today, number 20, is the Leonin lightscribe. And I like this card because it's a 2/2 for 2, which really helps out decks like the cat decks in particular, because this is both a cat and a cleric. Gives you a good early play card for that deck, but also basically gives your whole team prowess. And we know prowess is good on a singular creature, so it's even better when you can give your whole team a +1/+1. And even, when you consider the fact that a lot of times cat deck are making tokens, but really just don't have a way to punch through because the creatures are all too small. This could also fit well in a cleric build. If you're maybe going to be removing something or gaining some life, and then all your creatures get a bonus or 2, and then you're able to attack with 4/4s, 5/5, 6/6, that could be pretty big. And some of your stuff also has lifelink, so if you're talking about getting to that higher life total for some bonuses faster, this could work into your favor as well. So I really like where this card, it feels very simple, but it's filling a couple of different holes. I hope it helps bring a couple of the cats and clerics maybe decks, up to par, I would say. I don't think it's going to bring them up to tier 1, but at least if it keeps them in just competitive ladder fashion, that would be good enough. And that's going to wrap up our top 20 most interesting cards from Strixhaven. Let me know in the comments down below if you had a card that I didn't include on the list that you found very interesting. Or if you think my list is garbage, feel free to let me know as well. I hope you don't think it's garbage. I put some real time into this, but maybe you do think it's garbage. I don't know. I can't think for you. But you have all the freedom in the world to tell me down below. Also, remember, if you haven't, to like this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. That really helps our video gets out in front of people, and it lets me know you appreciate what I'm doing, and you get notified every time I have a new video out. Also, remember, if you're shopping on TCGPlayer or Amazon for anything, if you use one of the links in the description below, I'll get a small kickback, and you'll be helping the channel out without spending any extra money. So that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.